Hey everyone, I'm MonkeyoChaos, and this is my review of Godfall. Godfall is a looter slasher. Think Destiny without the guns. It's currently a timed exclusive on the PS5 and the Epic Game Store. Exclusivity ends May 2021, and they haven't announced where it's going after that. I've got about 50 or so hours into the game now, so I feel like I'm in a pretty good place to talk about it and help you decide if it's the right game for you. So let's jump right in and start with the good. This game is pretty. Character design is very cool. The player armor called Valor Plates all look really good. The enemies look great, and the environments are breathtaking. It's a very interesting, technologically advanced high fantasy setting. So just looking around at all the buildings, the architecture, the scenery, it looks really cool. My only complaint of the graphics department is that sometimes there can be too many particle effects flying around, and it can be hard to actually see what's going on. It's a minor gripe, and overall the game is gorgeous. Combat is a mixed bag, something that people are going to either love or hate depending on personal preference. The weapons all feel good and have a good weight to them. Bashing on enemies feels really satisfying. The point of contention for a lot of people is that there's no animation cancels, which makes the combat feel clunky for some. So if you press the inputs for a combo, you're going to finish out that combo before you can do anything else, for instance dodge, block, or parry. So if you start a combo and then an enemy signals a big attack, you likely aren't going to be able to react in time. What this means is that you need to pay a lot more attention to enemy attack patterns and sometimes hold back an attack or two in anticipation of the enemy's actions. It's a strange choice considering how much Godfall's devs push the idea of being very offensively focused. That said, once you get used to it, combat's very satisfying. There are a lot of interesting moves and skills to play around with. Two of the more major combat mechanics are Soul Shatter and Breach. Soul Shatter damage builds up on an enemy's life bar with light attacks, and when you hit them with a heavy attack, it will wipe out the portion of HP covered by the Soul Shatter bar. If this kills the enemy, they'll explode in a cloud of particles. Breach damage is a bar that builds up underneath the enemy health bar, and when it fills up, you get the chance to do a takedown attack, which is a type of finisher that will kill off all but the strongest enemies. Bosses that you breach will typically get stunned for a short period. Initially, a lot of your moves are locked out, another strange choice, but I'd highly recommend using your first few skill points to unlock the 4 corners of the skill tree, and then branching from those and getting 1 point into the other nodes that unlock moves. This way you can get a feel for how the combat flows with all the options available to you, and you can respec for free as often as you want, so there's no reason not to experiment and figure out what suits your playstyle. There isn't any mission diversity to speak of. Every mission is basically, go kill this person. You basically do a series of kill missions leading up to a boss for the zone, then move on to the next zone and repeat till the end of the game. So let's talk about the story in Godfall. And that's it. But seriously, there isn't anything worth talking about here. The story is about as uninspired as you can get. The devs realize that a game like this doesn't really need a solid story, and so at least I hope they didn't put much work into it, because it's really bare bones and not interesting at all. And now we come to the meat and potatoes of the game, builds, and the endgame loop. First off, the Valor Plates, Godfall's different armor sets. Think Warframes from Warframe, which is the comparison I'm sure a lot of people would make when seeing the trailers and materials leading up to the release of this game. And if you did make that comparison, you'd be very disappointed. The Valor Plates are all very similar. They don't really do anything to feel different from one another. They all have some passive ability. For a majority of them, it's 10% increased chance to inflict a status ailment. So 10% chance to inflict ignite, chill, poison, etc. The biggest problem, which makes that even more uninspired, is that there's no difference at all between the status ailments. Every status ailment is just damage over time with no additional effect. Chill doesn't slow enemies, poison doesn't make enemies more susceptible to further damage. They're all exactly the same, just damage over time. Other than passives, the Valor Plates have an active called Archon's Fury, which you can unleash once you build up enough charge. There are 3 different effects depending on the Valor Plate. You'll either do a shockwave of damage, summon 3 spirit warriors that fight with you, or summon 3 sentinels, which act like damaging totems. After that, there's a fairly short duration in which you don't take damage, and then you have a different effect for the duration, depending on which plate you're using. For the ailment-focused plates, it's a 90% chance to inflict the ailment, plus 100% damage to enemies inflicted with the ailment, and your attacks do damage of the corresponding type. For instance, if you're wearing Phoenix and you're doing Ignite, then the damage you're doing is fire damage. And that covers 6 of the 12 Valor plates. The others are a mix of random effects such as the Tanky plate that normally reduces damage by a measly 5%, during Archon Fury reduces damage for you and nearby allies by 30%. Or the Crit plate, which normally increases your crit chance by 5%, increases your chance by 30%, and you get a stacking crit damage during the effect for each enemy you kill. When not popping your Archon Fury though, the Valor plates all handle exactly the same. They don't handle differently, they don't have different movesets, they're all identical, which is really disappointing and a huge missed opportunity. The biggest difference in how they act comes from the augment tree, which is a mixture of red, green, and blue nodes that you can slot augments into to do different things. As with gear, the higher rarity augments have the more interesting effects, such as this one that summons a Spirit Warrior when you place your banner, or this one that gains you overhealth, HP above and beyond your normal HP bar, when you crit. Each Valor plate has a different tree with a different layout, allowing for at least some difference in builds. Where the build diversity really comes into play is in your gear. You have 2 weapon slots which you can switch between, an amulet, a charm, 2 rings, a lifestone, and a banner, as well as your augments. Each piece of gear has a primary effect and then some number of secondary effects depending on its level and rarity. Legendaries have some very cool effects that are going to be what you're building around. For instance, this polearm which unleashes a shockwave of air damage when you hit a shocked enemy, or this hammer that has a chance to drop orbs which then blow up if you hit or evade into them. There are all sorts of interesting effects to play around with, or if you'd prefer to just a big stat stick, you can instead upgrade a lower rarity weapon that has something like plus 12% chance to inflict bleed. Any piece of gear can be upgraded to legendary and upgraded another 5 times, which increases the damage and gives you a choice of secondary effects. And this way you can try to tailor your gear to whatever build you're going for. For instance, pairing this shock weapon, which does a shockwave of damage whenever you hit a shocked enemy, with this charm that builds up a charge whenever you hit a shocked enemy, you can do a ton of AoE damage by combining these 2 things. And then you can build off of that with other pieces of gear too. And you can see that I rolled the secondary abilities on these to complement the build as well by adding some shock chance and shock damage. So what's the point of all this gear and kitting out your build? Well, there are 3 endgame activities: the Ascended Tower of Trials, Dreamstones, and just exploring the realm. Exploring the realm is simply running around one of the 3 worlds, killing things as you please and completing the objectives to open chests. Typically, you're only going to be doing this if you ran out of cash to run the other 2 activities. The Ascended Tower of Trials is a never-ending tower. You'll have a timed fight against enemies as the elevator moves up. Finishing off the enemies within a certain time frame will get you keys. Once you finish them off, you'll be presented with different doors with symbols corresponding to what reward lies behind them. Choose a door and fight the enemies inside to unlock the rewards, either a buff that will help you for the remainder of the run, more keys, or loot. The loot rooms will offer 1 free low rarity chest, and if you want to unlock further chests, you'll need to spend your keys. Then back in the elevator, up to the next level, and repeat, with the difficulty increasing as you rise through the levels. Your run ends when you die for a 3rd time. The tower can be a good way to farm for particular gear, as you can try to focus on certain pieces by opening those kinds of doors. But it's all luck based, so there's no guarantee you're going to see any legendary chest regardless of how high you go. It can be especially infuriating when your run is ended by a bug that causes the room to not register all enemies as dead and you're left just running around in circles trying to find the enemy you're missing. The last endgame activity are Dreamstones, shorter activities that have you killing a few smaller bosses and unlocking rewards and info about the boss fight ahead, and ending in an amped up version of one of the game's bosses. These reward crafting materials as well as various loot, and seem to have a pretty good drop rate for legendaries. They range from level 30 to level 60, with you having to beat your way through them to gain access to the higher level options. After each stage you clear leading up to the boss, you'll be presented with a choice of 3 buffs to help you in your fight. Sometimes these will be useless and not play into your current build at all, and other times they'll play into your build perfectly and help you tear through everything with ease. Running Dreamstones costs Electrum, the game's main currency, so eventually you'll run out of cash and need to go do other things to build your reserves back up. And that's it. All in all, it can get incredibly repetitive and pretty mindless. So why at 50 hours deep am I still playing? I personally like to have this kind of mindless game that I can jump into and just smash some heads and I don't really have to think about anything. There isn't really anything too deep to get lost in here, and the combat is deep enough to be satisfying, but not so deep that I feel like I really need to concentrate while I'm playing. It's the perfect game to relax and unwind. Unfortunately, it's not great for relaxing and unwinding with friends. Whereas I personally didn't run into very many bugs in single player, though there have been plenty reported. Where I did run into issues was with multiplayer. random disconnects, having to remake the party after every single mission we ran, and other random issues maybe want to just quit and go play something else when trying to play with others. And no matchmaking is a deal breaker for some, though it's easy enough to jump into Discord and find a party if you really want to. And all of my gameplay has been on PC. So I have mixed feelings on this game. Do I think it's a great game? No. Have I personally recommended it to my friends? No. Do I think it's worth $60? Not really. But I do enjoy playing it. There's a lot of things they could do to make it better, but Gearbox has really stressed that this is not a game as a service, so it's not really clear how much more time and effort they plan on putting into this, which makes me a little worried. I don't want to hate on the game too much. I do enjoy it, but at the end of the day, I can't say I recommend it. Though maybe if you're like me and you're looking for something to fill that spot in your library of your go-to, I don't want to think about anything right now game, this could be for you. Hopefully this review was helpful. I'm going to be trying to get more stuff like this up on my page going forward. Feel free to jump in the comments, let me know what you think of the review and of Godfall. And if you'd like to see more content from me, please hit those like and subscribe buttons, and let me know what other games you're looking forward to in the comments. I'm MonkeyoChaos, and thanks for watching.